Hey everybody, Xeno back here for a new and potentially interesting type of video. We all know Mega Man 2, the stereotypical favorite of most gaming magazines and websites, always the most praised entry in the series, at least until a few years ago. Most of us, however, know this game for one very specific thing, and that's the Metal Blade. So the question I'm here to answer today is, can you beat Mega Man 2 with only the Metal Blade? And I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, Xeno, what about the alien? What about the Boo Beam Trap? Let's get into stipulations right now. As most of you know, several of the game's bosses and enemies are immune to the Metal Blade, meaning that under normal circumstances this wouldn't be possible. You also don't start the game with the Metal Blade, so I suppose the challenge would be ruined from that point anyways. Either way, I've put together this custom ROM that I'm playing right now, which alleviates these issues. So these are going to be the stipulations of the challenge. There's a Game Genie code that renders the Metal Blade accessible from the start, meaning that we'll have it for every stage, including Metal Man stage. I've edited the boss damage values, with one exception that I'll talk about later because it was too problematic. So all bosses now take at least 1 damage from the Metal Blade. Bosses that were previously immune to it were edited to take the minimal 1 damage from it, which will allow us to clear the challenge. Aside from that, everything else has been left unchanged. Enemies that are immune to the Metal Blade are still immune to it because they're not required kills. Required utility usage will be ignored for this challenge since obviously in places like Wily 1 and Wily 2 the use of the items is required and that's completely unavoidable. But aside from that, we will only be using the Metal Blade from here on out. Let's get started. Truth be told, Airman stage doesn't see a whole lot of gameplay changes from this. It was already Metal Blade central to begin with, considering none of the enemies are immune to it, aside from the Tikis if you count those. But either way, this stage really isn't that much to write home about. You can clear it perfectly as usual. I've decided that since I've enabled Metal Blade from the start that I didn't feel obligated to start with Metal Man, which will serve us well later on since we're gonna need the E-Tanks, to be totally transparent. Airman himself is a bit of a pain with the stipulations of this challenge. He's typically immune to the Metal Blade, so we're doing only 1 damage per toss here. But nothing that's terribly difficult to get around. There's little reason not to go after Metal Man next after beating Airman, since it'll allow us to get all the items in this stage very easily. Disabling the cheat that gives Metal Blade early will also help prevent weird glitches that I noticed while testing this, so better to get it out of the way sooner or later. One interesting thing actually does come from this challenge is that the Piero bots themselves are not immune to the Metal Blade, but the gears are, so dodging them can be kind of annoying. Oh, case in point. Did you really think there was going to be anything to say about Metal Man? Craftsman stage doesn't leave a whole lot to talk about. This place was already decimated by the Metal Blade, and this challenge doesn't really change anything about that. Definitely a pain to have to climb up these ladders since we're restricting non-mandatory uses of items, though, that's for sure. You're going to want the E-Tank, as I mentioned. Things get pretty dicey with some of the bosses. Crashman isn't terribly noteworthy either, aside from the fact that this fight takes a while. Stage choice from this point on is very arbitrary, although I definitely wouldn't recommend coming to Quickman's stage in particular unless you have a decent amount of E-Tanks. He's probably the boss that has the most obnoxious win condition with the Metal Blades, because it doesn't take any damage from them in the original, meaning that he only takes 1 damage from them now. It's a right pain. This segment obviously does not change, but might as well show it off anyways. Or not. Joe armors are very annoying in this challenge. They don't take any damage from the Metal Blade, so it's usually better to just tank damage from them when you can, rather than getting stomped on. But in this case, it's whatever. As I mentioned, Quickman is a huge pain in this challenge. He does so much damage to you very erratically, and chipping away at his health 1 tick at a time makes getting through here very annoying. Definitely bring E-Tanks to this fight. Otherwise, you'll probably run out of either health or ammo. Getting the last out of the more painful stages out of the way, we have Heatman. This one's definitely a pain, primarily because Metal Blade usage means that we don't have item 2 to cross the big, annoying Yoku block gap. No crash bombs means no skipping any of this part either. But it's more just tedious than actually difficult, at least for this part. This block jumping segment is a different story. This room with the Sniper Joe mech is the icing on the cake. I messed up. Little piece of trivia for you. Heatman is the only boss that takes neutral damage from the Metal Blade in the original game, meaning that this fight hasn't changed at all. It's, again, very tedious, similarly to Crashman. Bubbleman stage sees no meaningful change in gameplay. Everything here already got shredded by the blades anyways. Poor Bubbleman doesn't get to do much either. Flashman stage is the same as ever, but do your best to avoid the Sniper Joe mechs. They are absolutely relentless, and there is nothing you can do against them with the Metal Blade. Flashman's weak to Metal Blade 2, so you know what that means. Woodman stage may honestly be the most boring one in the entire one. The only creature in these woods that can stand a chance against the Metal Blade is the Atomic Chickens, and those just hop right over you. The rest of them just get completely decimated. It's a good thing Woodman already didn't like the Metal Blade, otherwise this would be a really painful boss fight. Wily 1 marks the first stage in the run where ammo conservation is even remotely important, as we want to make sure we don't run out of it for the fortress. It also presents the first instance of forced utility usage, unfortunately. Not that it's terribly problematic, mostly boils down to item 1 and 3 usage. The rest of the stage isn't that much to talk about. Horrible sprite flicker aside, Mecha Dragon is the same as ever, just with Metal Blade instead of Quick Boomerang. Aside from the usual tedium, Wily 2 is completely unremarkable. Nothing here to talk about, really. Aside from the boss, that is, which already takes damage from the Metal Blade, so scratch that, actually. Wily 3 was already one of the most boring stages in the game, if not the most boring. Metal Blade restrictions don't change anything here, aside from getting sniped by these crazy cannons more than likely. Gutsdozer goes down like a complete chump, as usual. Metal Blade makes this fight even easier, since you can sometimes hit his forehead from the ground. Believe it or not, Wily 4 marks the point in the run when energy conservation actually becomes important. From here on out, there will be very few opportunities to refill your Metal Blade, so definitely watch that. This is probably the single most annoying room in this challenge. Tanking hits from sniper armors is the only real way to get through here. This Joe in this tight hallway doesn't really do you much better. You'll end up entering the booby trap fight with very low health regardless, which is kind of a shame. Unless you get a health drop from this Joe, but more than likely you'll be kind of bruised. This is another point in the run when E-tanks are pretty vital. This also brings me to the single most interesting thing that I learned while trying to put together this ROM, which is that the booby trap weakness value is not stored in its code like the other enemies is. It's really interesting. I produced this ROM by doing hex editing, and the value for booby trap is actually unused in the weapon's code. Every other weapon has values that are 1 bit long that represent how much damage they do to each respective boss, but the booby trap's value is unused. Instead, it's flagged elsewhere in the code, and the exact location of that is not something I was able to find out, and trust me, I tried for multiple hours. There's a ROM hack of this game called Mega Man 2 Randomizer by Duckfist that actually does give the booby trap alternate weaknesses, but I wasn't able to figure out where that code actually is by looking at the Mega Man 2 Randomizer code either, so unfortunately this is the one point in the run when I wasn't able to hex edit the boss's weakness out, but I can show you that if I was able to hit these, this boss wouldn't be a problem anyways, so we're just gonna consider this. We're just going to write this off as a programming loss and move on, but it is possible theoretically. If you do know any way to correct this, do let me know, because I would like for this ROM to be totally playable Metal Blade only. Other than that, we're moving on from this point. As I mentioned earlier, this is the point in the run when weapon energy usage actually becomes problematic. Mathematically, it's actually impossible to finish this stage with the amount of Metal Blades you're given and the damage values assigned to the bosses, because there are 4 bosses that take only 1 damage from the Metal Blade, and you get 4 shots per bar. However, due to a glitch, a commonly known glitch with the Metal Blade, Quick Boomerang, and Bubble Lead, you can have infinite Metal Blade by switching to a different weapon after firing off 3 of them and then switching it back. This does render the challenge completable, so we're going to take it, but definitely a pain in the ass to do for some of these bosses. Not Metal Man, though. Bye-bye. Even on flat terrain, Quickman is a huge pain in the ass in this challenge. Wily Machine 2 isn't too different than usual, but you definitely want your E-tanks here, at least if you don't have spare lives like I do. Even with the best play I can muster, it's pretty difficult to eke out a win against the Wily Machines while still performing a Metal Blade glitch enough to preserve your ammo. You really need all of your E-tanks, and that's coming from somebody that's played this game a million times. I'm already out, but thankfully the alien fight won't be a very difficult part of this run. Definitely make sure you don't run out of ammo, though, as mentioned a million times before. By the time I got here, even after using the glitch on nearly every single Robot Master, I came with just enough ammo. You really need the pause glitch to get through this, as well as all of your E-tanks. I'm completely empty. But let's wrap this up once and for all. Taking down the alien with Metal Blade is no sweat. This is the weapon it should have been weak to in the first place. And with that, the challenge is over. Honestly, doing this was pretty interesting, I'd say. I wasn't expecting it to be as tedious as it was, but the bosses were definitely the worst part. Special shout out to Quickman and then the entire Wily 5 through 6 portion for being very tedious, what with the lack of energy necessitating the use of the weapon pausing glitch. Just a very tedious challenge overall, but it can be done. So we have our answer. You can indeed beat Mega Man 2 with only the Metal Blade, under a set of specific conditions which involve modifying the game, but it can be done. It's proven regardless. As a little review for the challenge, it was definitely interesting, again, kind of tedious. It was fun doing the research required to do the hex edits for the bosses, I will say that. I'm a little disappointed I couldn't figure out the flag for the booby trap, but I am opening the forum up to anybody viewing this video. If you do know how to edit it, let me know. And this modified ROM will be basically complete. Thank you all for joining me on this little adventure. If this type of content does interest my audience, I may consider making other videos of this type for other weapons. This is definitely kind of an experimental idea I had. Something a little different than my usual commentary, but something that I thought might be interesting to the Mega Man community as a whole. Not sure. We'll see how this does. And maybe we'll do another one at some point. For now, this is Xeno, signing off. Bye-bye.